you can kind of develop that by like working in those kinds of contexts as well.
Yeah, super cool. That does sound familiar to me as well. Wait, Alex, so it said in your bio that you are working in audio product development. What exactly is that, and what are you doing?
Sure. So in addition to my work as an audio engineer, I am now starting a additional business to develop products for creative professionals, media spaces, recording studios, producers, engineers. And I've started a company with the Crosley Acoustics team. Timothy Crosley and Matthew Schaefer both are very accomplished studio designers and systems designers and systems integrators, and they are helping me with wiring my studio. But over the course of our working relationship, we developed an interest in working together to create better products for the studio. And for my studio design, I did a lot of engineering and development into speaker isolation. And my speaker front wall, the speakers that are built into the front wall make use of some very sophisticated isolation techniques that I developed with my primary studio designer, Horacio Malvicino. And I realized, like, I've been doing all this engineering and development for my own space. Why don't I bring some of this, research and development into the larger market? So our first product is going to be a very high-performance speaker stand that has height motorization as standard, as well as very high-performance vibration isolation built in. And so the idea with our speaker stand is that it is like the ultimate speaker stand that is easy to set up. You can adjust the height very easily, and it has extremely high-performance vibration isolation without having to buy any additional pucks or isolation things. It's sort of like the ultimate stand.
What kind of technology is being used to make it so good?
Sure. So the first thing really about the first thing we wanted to think about was the ergonomics of interacting with it. So it's very easy to set up. Rather than having to have like a wrench to climb under the bottom of it and adjust spikes to level it, you can just use some simple thumb screws to level the base. So it's easier to set up. Then rather than having to adjust the height of the platform manually, whether with pins or an adjustable wrench or something like that, it's all motorized. So we're in 2021, everything should be easy to do, right? So we have a motorized lifting column that actually lifts the height of the speaker to whatever you desire, and you can save memory positions if you want. You could have the speakers go out of the way of the console, for example, if you wanted to drop them down behind a console to have clearer sound presentation from your mains if you wanted. Or, for example, you could tweak your speaker heights while you're listening to them a little bit to kind of dial in the sweet spot. So they're more adjustable, right? Easier to set up. But in terms of the vibration isolation, we're using a advanced material called Silomer, which is made by a company in Germany called Getzner, and it's a very interesting material that it basically looks like rubber, but it's more than just rubber. And we've worked with an acoustics consulting firm in Spain called AMC to do advanced engineering calculations for us to get very, very effective isolation for 3 different speaker weight ranges. So we're going to sell 3 different options, sort of small, medium, and large. And depending on the weight of your speaker, you'll tell us which version you want. And the performance, the isolation performance will be below 10 hertz for most users. And what that means is that all the vibration above 10 hertz will be fully attenuated. None of that vibration will get into the stand or into the floor. And what you might say, what's the benefit of this, right? Mostly you're going to hear bass response improvements to your speaker. And you're also not going to hear something called parasitic crosstalk. So when you have 2 speakers, or this also works for multiple speakers in surround setups, each speaker is vibrating, and each speaker's vibrations get conducted into its stand or platform or whatever its surface is on, and that vibration gets into the structure of your space, and then it literally travels through your stand, into your floor, through the floor, into the other stand, into your speaker. And it subtly shakes, very subtly, it shakes the other speaker. And what does this do? It collapses your stereo image. it creates distortion in the low end. And we can improve upon these things with simple science and sort of relatively basic engineering and good design.
Amazing! Wow, I would love to see a picture of this if you have
definitely.
Anything,
yeah, we're getting ready to launch probably second quarter of this year, and so I will be sure to share with you some of the images and our content.
Awesome. Well, if there's something I could share with the audience, even that would be awesome. If not, that's also cool, and I totally get it.
Definitely.
Awesome. We're already getting kind of late on time, so I want to jump into the sauce segment before we miss it. You sent me a track before we got into this called "Missing You" by, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Lynx and Evangelia.
That's right.
Awesome. So we're gonna have a listen to about 90 seconds or so of the track, and we'll talk about what went into it. Let's get into it.
Awesome.
What's a memory anyway? Imagination, they say. Limited trips round the sun might be done before it's begun. Keep it loose, keep it free, let it move, let it be. Salt water will wash it away. I don't need wings to fly through the unknown. Keep it loose, keep it free, let it move, let it be. Don't sit and watch the colors all play. Hey, it's always when the lights dim that I miss you, I miss you. Nothing's really over, no. Keep it loose, keep it free, let it move, let it be. Salt water will wash it away. I don't need wings to fly through the unknown. Keep it loose, keep it free, let it move, let it be. Don't sit and watch the colors all play.
Yeah, dude, what a cool song! It's a banger, as they like to say, as the youths like to call it.
Yeah,
these
definitely
days.
A banger.
So tell me a bit about that song. I guess what were you involved with? Where was the song at when it fell in your lap, basically?
Sure. So Lynx is a producer here in New York, and he is one of my favorite producers to work with, mostly because I just love his music and I love him. Like, he's the nicest guy, and we vibe really well, and we both kind of like each other. We like what we do for each other. I like what the songs he makes are. I like the artists he works with. I like the tracks he sends me, and he just really is very happy with what I do mixing wise and mastering wise for him. And so it's a very friendly and kind of satisfying creative and professional relationship because we both are into what we're bringing to the table. And that is so important, I think, really as a mixer, to have the opportunity to work with a producer whose music really speaks to you. Because I work on all different kinds of music, all different kinds of artists, and I love every track that I work on. I put my heart into every track, but not every track necessarily is stylistically like completely the same. It doesn't necessarily resonate with you completely the same, right? So with Lynx's stuff, I really resonate with the music that he's making, and I feel like I kind of like am in his head when he's making it. And basically what we do is he sends me tracks and I mix them for him, right? Pretty normal, working relationship. But we have a very close collaboration where I will give him my first draft, and then he and I will really chat about the presentation of the sounds. And I don't just feel like I'm delivering a mix and he says I like it or I don't like it or fix this, change this. We really kind of dive into the role of each sound. And I always talk with him a lot before I begin, and I always am communicating a lot with him during the course of the process to make sure that I'm presenting elements in the way that he feels is right. And this song really kind of was a good example of a track that takes a lot of work. He is a very accomplished producer. He's a great sound designer, a great engineer. But what he wants to put out in the world like needs massaging and manipulation and kind of like enhancement in the ways that I know how to do. And so this particular track has really, really forceful, impactful drums and a very aggressive bass line and then a very forward vocal. All these things are kind of loud and proud and kind of need to be out there, be present, but they're also, how do you fit them all together, right? So this particular track was like a real study in parallel compression on drums and dynamic manipulation on like the envelope of the drums to get them to sound impactful. You want that
like transient designers.
Yeah, transient designers. And I do a lot of transient shaping in parallel as well as on individual tracks. I like adding a parallel attack enhancement, especially to kick and snare.
Wow, I never would have thought of doing that. That's so cool.
It's really handy when you want to kind of control that impulse. And, you know, in addition to controlling the tonality of things, a more advanced concept to think about is impulse energy and the shape of the dynamic impulses. And we think of that most traditionally in terms of compression, right? Like attack and release lets you control the shape of the transient a little bit.
Sure.
But in this particular mix, I wanted to have the drums be super loud and impactful while also not sounding too attacky. I want them to have impact, but I didn't want to just rely on adding attack with the transient designer. So I had to do a lot of shaping and sculpting to the envelope to make it feel thick and pokey, but not spiky, so to speak. And that's part of the overall loudness, you know, profile as well. Like you can't have something with a lot of attack and also have headroom. Like you're going to shave that off.
Right.
So
yeah, it did feel like there was like this bright energy, like like almost like a top end energy to the drums and just in general to the track.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
Definitely. Well, that's a lot of mix bus EQ and a lot of like individual channel EQ as well. I do a lot of top end boost on the mix bus and I do that with like really nice hardware, you know, if possible. And that helps me brighten everything up without having to deal with the phase shift of the individual tracks, you know, boosting top end on every single track, for example. That's where mix bus processing can really become handy as well. Is sometimes it's actually cleaner to do a macro adjustment on the mix bus than add 20 EQs across all the tracks.
That's super, super interesting. Wow, cool. Yeah, and what did you do there with like the bass? Like,
yeah, so the bass is an interesting instrument. This track, the bass came in a little dark. It wasn't particularly present. It was fat and chunky and thick and had sort of the low end more or less there, but it didn't have the brightness and the presence. And the bass really features as a big element in the song. In certain sections, it's like the dominant instrument, you know, for certain sections. And a lot of parallel processing. And something I do with bass is I'll actually send to an auxiliary, high pass the track, compress the track, and distort the track, and then blend that back in. So I'm actually adding treble and sort of presence range energy that's been squashed and distorted and saturated. And this track definitely needed a lot of that because it was very dull sounding when it came in. So I made the bass more of a feature instead of just being the weight. It became more of a primary instrument as well.
Right. It was pokey. It poked through. You know.
Yeah.
Love it. And I was also crazy reverbs. Like what kind of reverbs were you using on this track?
I don't remember exactly, but I do like to play with a few different reverbs, and I also will cascade delays and reverbs together. So sometimes I'll have like a primary vocal reverb, and then I will send to a delay that then also sends from the delay return into that same reverb. And that way I can create a musical pre-delay to create not only an extension of that reverb a bit, but it creates a little bit of a kind of ambient echo.
Wild.
I do that even on like acoustic jazz music too, but like you would never know because it just sounds like a cool space. But for this track where it's like very electronic and you can really get more overt with the effects, you really hear that kind of slappy sort of echoey reverb. And I love like Eventide Black Hole. I love like long plate reverbs. I love the UAD reverbs, Lexicon. I have a couple